that economists think about a lot, but I think thinking about it in a way that's actually meaningful for policy challenges us to take it a step further. So it's not just can we quantify the trade-offs, but can we quantify the trade-offs in a way that's useful for these folks to actually take that information and do something sensible with it. And then Veronica, I think you said many wonderful things, but the one that I wrote down that I was most excited about was this notion of how regulating for unknowns is already challenging to do and even more challenging to evaluate. And I think sort of asking all of us to nevertheless be as proactive as we can in that context. Then we had a second panel on evidence-based healthcare and science policy. I spoke too quickly about how we can use data sets and tools from causal inference to evaluate the impact of our policies without doing experiments. I think one of the big themes of the panel was that even in the absence of running RCTs, we can use good methods to really take a deep look at what was going on, understand counterfactuals, and make, nevertheless, better evidence-based policy decisions. Chris, who I think just stepped out from the Ministry of Health, did a terrific talk. He talked us through both how legislation works, but as well as the opportunities to be agile within that process. And we talked specifically about how to facilitate data access. I think it sort of tees up nicely with some of the broader themes that Simon shared in his keynote. But sort of, I think in the healthcare sector in particular, what other areas of policymaking will soon be able to learn from the healthcare sector, from the European health data space, and from some of the, what I consider, as someone who does study healthcare, the very progressive efforts of the two most recent ministries of health to actually make health data laws and progress that will facilitate the type of research that I think we're all here to talk about today. And last but not least, we heard from Kyle, who gave this wonderful talk about the science of science policy, reminded us of the big picture, why do we care about science, and what does a good RCT, but what does a good non-RCT actually look like, and how can we continue to learn from data? I think, my postdoc who was here earlier, she told me that her biggest takeaway was that if you look at the 90-10 interval of how productive the best scientists are relative, if you look at the 90th percentile versus the 10th percentile of scientists, that there's a 30-fold difference in their productivity, which is about 15 times more than the types of productivity differences we see in industry. That blew her mind, and I think that it's a good reminder to us, though, that when we talk about investing in science, all science is not created equal. We don't, investments in science are not going to be uniformly productive. Good science policy is good economic policy. We had a bunch of different data points to convince us of that, but not every euro thrown at the scientific endeavor will be equally well invested. And so I think that's all the more call to action for us when we think about, are there ways through public programs to actually subsidize bringing researchers into our institutions? Let's do it in a thoughtful way. Let's do it not in a way that's just random. I don't think I need to summarize this panel because it just happened, but I thought this panel was really wonderful. And Simon, thank you for your keynotes. I wrote down your 5 principles for researchers. I'd like those in writing, please, so I can send them to my team as well. But I think so many takeaways. I thought the sort of comparisons with the UK were really interesting. Being sort of both German and American, I am used to sort of bashing both countries, I think opportunistically thinking about when can we learn from one another, but when can we also say, this was something that actually didn't go so well or isn't going well. I think you highlighted a bunch of the things that the UK does well. I think there are other times when we can go in both directions. But I thought that was terrific. Marta, you said many wonderful things, but I think sort of thinking about not just the organizational barriers, but the systemic barriers. I really enjoyed this last set of conversations we had about, I wrote down the question for myself, does Germany need more of a revolving door? I think is, it's related to the last set of discussions we had, but how can we facilitate this in a more meaningful way? Kara and I, unexpectedly, we had a conversation over lunch about this, which is just the difference between the US and the German system where, so I was formerly a colleague of both Chiara and Kyle's, and the biggest badge of honor for our senior colleagues at Harvard was to go spend 2 years in government, because you can put your tenure on hold for up to 24 months. It's like 2 calendar years minus 1 day, and actually go be a senior advisor in any of the the equivalent of ministries in the U.S. And I think that this is something that doesn't exist in Germany. It makes it all the more important that we have these types of events and we have these conversations and we have these expert committees that advise our ministries. It's a privilege to participate in some of those conversations, but I think thinking about are there more ways to kickstart the flywheel, because we have a bit of a coalition of the willing here. We have the people from ministries and from government who are most excited about this particular agenda here. So in that respect, we have the good type of selection problem, but how can we sort of kickstart the flywheel and actually, a lot of economists in the room, create real value and demonstrate that value for the potential users of this information. And so I think this is something that I will take away from this conversation. I think the notion of having good ideas, on the shelf, or as U.S. policymakers would say, sort of shovel ready is, I think, vitally important, and sort of not being reactive but being proactive about the types of policy research we do. Also important. With that note, I wanted to end with, so as those of you who know me know that I'm an ice hockey fan. There's a very famous quote that gets misquoted quite frequently by Wayne Gretzky, who is sort of arguably the best ice hockey player of the 1990s, which is when I was going to high school in the US. And he said, I skate to where the puck is going, not where the puck is. And I think this is a really nice way of thinking about a research agenda as well. Because, what we should be doing, and I think what everybody here strives to do is not just to, okay, what are we doing right now? Crap, can we evaluate it? Like, yes, that's an interesting question, but I think a more powerful question is, where do we need to be 2 years from now when we need to write a new law related to data use? And how can we lay the groundwork for having a good answer to these questions down the road? So I will leave you with that. Thank everyone. Nils, do you have any more? You have some closing notes of various kinds, but thank you everyone for a rich set of conversations. I really enjoyed today.
Yeah, also have just some final thoughts. Also like to talk really fast, so it's not going to take too long. So yeah, thank you so much. For me personally, I think this was, as we were planning the event, this one went well beyond what I was initially expecting. So if you ever organize an event, do it with Ariel. It's fun, it's fast, it's very efficient. Once she got involved, it quickly became very structured. So yeah, Kyle and Chiara, thanks for coming across the Atlantic to make this happen. We really want to sort of like bring this evidence-based debate to Germany. And Simon, I think I speak for many in our generation that I see a bit of like, I think we discussed a lot of like what we can do to implement this top down. I think there is a growing group of people in our generation really convinced that this is the right way forward. And so we really actively hope that you also, back in Princeton, also stay actively involved on this side of the Atlantic, not only in academia, but like also in policymaking. Cornelia mentioned that it was part of the founding principle of this institution to actively shape like a bureaucracy in Germany, not merely based on law. And I think what we saw today was already evidencing that the school has partly succeeded, as not only Christian, who moderated the first panel, was educated initially at Hertie, but also Michael, where he's at. Yeah. So not only a lawyer, but yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think this is the end of the event, but hopefully so like the beginning of more to come. And I don't know exactly what should come out of this, but yeah, if we can stay loosely in touch and engaged on this, I think that'd be really valuable, because yeah, I think it really is a way of making policy better, and I think we're all very passionate about that. So thanks for staying until the end. Yeah, thanks.